receive a lecture. Well, it's actually 3 counts. Second, you'll be forced to pay more attention to me and less what's up there. And third, I have and had some very cool YouTube clips that go along with this lecture. And it's a real bummer. But I'm going to have to, I will have to act them out myself. Not quite, but I'll do my best. You'll see why. This lecture isn't really fully about Cold War realism. It's about Cold War realism and what happens afterward. You'll see by the things I assigned today. Today I assigned 3 articles. One by somebody who says that Iran should be bombed. The second who says that Iran should not be bombed. And the third, it was a fascinating piece written by Bernard Lewis, who was one of the great scholars of modern Turkey, really from the 18th century onward. And he wrote this piece, you'll notice from the date on it, a couple weeks after 9/11. And he tries to understand exactly what happened and the nature of why there was terrorism coming out of the Middle East. He's trying to understand that. Now, several people wrote me complaining about that piece, saying it was insulting to Arab countries. I don't believe it was insulting to Arab countries, actually, but that's not even the point. We have assigned you in this course Lenin, Marx, Liszt, Thucydides, Constant. In short, a whole range of people. I'm asking you to agree with none of them. You don't have to agree with any of them. You don't have to like them. I don't like Lenin. I have to be honest. Right? He is not one of my favorite thinkers. But I think he's really important to read. You're not expected to agree with them. You're expected to engage them. End of discussion. Just for your information, and I'm going to come back, we'll come back to, I think the Bernard Lewis piece is a very important piece to understand if you're going to understand the origins and implications of American neoconservatism. And anybody in here, how many people in here like neoconservatives? How many people don't like neoconservatives? Good, excellent. So you're going to tell me exactly what neoconservatism is, now that we know you don't like it. Anybody else have an understanding of something they don't like? Good. Foreign policy. You don't like foreign policy? You don't like American foreign policy? What is neoconservative American foreign policy? I'm confused. It's invasive. Anybody ever got any ideas? Using war to spread democracy. Anybody, because there must have been like 40 or 50 hands up here. Everybody knew, I'm not a neocon, definitely. People like the word neocon. Canadians use the word neocon a lot. Neocon, it sounds like you're Neo from, what's his name? That guy who can act. Keanu, my buddy. It sounds like you know what you're talking about when you're using it. Yes. So maybe, hey, this is just a wild hypothesis. A wild hypothesis. It might be fun and good to learn about what something is before you say you don't like it. And I'm not saying you should like it. Neither would I say you should like Marx, or Lenin, or Constant, or Thucydides, or Liszt, or any of these people. But at least you should have some idea about what it is. This is my understanding of it. Then you can reject it. Fine, wonderful. Bless you. Okay. Let's start back, children. Once upon a time. Am I being patronizing here?
No.
Patronizing would be treating you as if I thought you were stupid. Talking down to you. I'm not going to talk down to you. I never talk down to you. I talk too fast to take notes. Here we have the Cold War. Origins of the Cold War. Don't pay attention to that man behind the screen. Origins of the Cold War. Starts after World War II with the division of Europe into spheres of influence. There you have Europe nicely chopped up into Western alliance in blue, the communist bloc in red, and the neutral countries in, what is that? I don't know, my mother would call that taupe. Beige. There goes Khrushchev, defecting to the West. Germany itself is divided into two. The green there are the three occupation zones of Germany, which become West Germany, the Federal Republic of Germany. And in red, the East Germany, the Soviet occupation zone, which becomes East Germany in 1949. So you have two countries formed in 1949. And then you'll notice there's Berlin in the middle of East Germany. Most people don't realize this. It's a city sitting in the middle of East Germany, which itself is subdivided between the East Berlin in red and West Berlin in green. You're asking yourself, how did West Berliners get to West Germany? They had to go through East Germany. They either flew, or they drove, or they took trains. And there were three corridors, one in the south, one in the middle, one in the north. And there were periodic attempts to shut down those corridors by the Soviets. All the fun and games of the Cold War. And separating between East and West Berlin there was, of course, the famous Berlin Wall. And it's big. Berlin is the size of Toronto. So you picture Toronto divided in half, with a wall running through Toronto. It's huge. It's not on a tiny scale. And the two sides were facing each other along that giant corridor running between East and West Germany there, with thousands of tanks, hundreds of thousands of troops, and nuclear weapons. Toe-to-toe, hair trigger, it could go at any time. This was a battle between two state alternative global orders, each with their own ideology, each with their own way of organizing society. Stalin, commenting to Milova Djilas, the Yugoslav communist, at the end of World War II, says the winners will impose their social system on the losers. It cannot be otherwise. And indeed, that's exactly what happens. All of Western Europe becomes democratic and capitalist. All of Eastern Europe, as we saw, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, becomes communist. And you have the divided middle of the divided middle, Germany, and then the divided city within the divided middle. And so you had, in West Berlin, you had American, British, and French soldiers all driving around, all with rights to drive into East Berlin, and they'd be packed, I lived there, they would be packed armed to the teeth, in jeeps, hanging out the side of the jeeps with their weapons, and driving by the East German border guards like this. Right? Because they knew, according to the occupation agreements, there's nothing the East Germans could do about it. So there you have West and East Berlin. Even closer. I live right here. If you look at that place in red, Checkpoint Charlie. all foreigners had to pass through Checkpoint Charlie in order to go through if you wanted to visit East Berlin. And when you went through, you were stripped, you were looked at very carefully, you had to change 25 West German marks and buy East German marks. Of course, there was nothing to buy on the other side. I bought books. I bought all my Marx books from the East German communist bookstores, and you could drink beer. Okay. This is just to give you some idea of how Europe was divided, because it's not that long ago, it's a mere 24 years ago, when Europe was divided this way. People who were in East Berlin could never, ever, ever, ever visit the West. Except if they were over 65. And then they were allowed to go, and for all the East German government cared, stay. Why? Because they're not working anymore. They're collecting West German pensions. East Germans could only vacation in Hungary, Bulgaria, the Soviet Union. They couldn't travel, really. West Germans, of course, went everywhere. Mostly to the Canary Islands, Spain. And so you have the Cold War. And really what makes the Cold War distinctive is not simply that you had the world divided into these two camps, each with its own ideology, each with its own way of doing things, but with nuclear weapons. By 1949, really by 1952, both sides have nuclear weapons, and not just a few nuclear weapons, but enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world. And the question became, and this is an interesting question, what is the status of a nuclear weapon? What can you do with a nuclear weapon? And this created a very interesting political conundrum. And it created the difference between deterrence versus defense. The fact of the matter is that, could you actually use nuclear weapons in a war? Was it a defensive weapon? Let's say they attacked you. Could you use nuclear weapons back? The problem with using nuclear weapons back is you would make the very territory that you wish to conquer, or to win, or to beat, you make it uninhabitable. No one could live there for hundreds of years. And so the weapons themselves were seen as instruments of deterrence against other nuclear weapons. Don't use nuclear weapons against us, or we will use ours against you, rather than don't use your tanks against us, or we will use nuclear weapons against you. Now, you could say that. If we believe we are going to lose the war, we will use our nuclear weapons against you. But between 1949 and 1968, what you had was the creation of this wonderfully named acronym, as nuclear doctrine of mutually assured destruction, otherwise known as MAD. You still have U.S. superiority in nuclear weapons between 1949 and 1968. It's superior in a number of respects. That is, they are technologically superior land weapons. They have a monopoly over sea-launched nuclear weapons. And they have B-52 bombers that can hit anywhere within the Soviet Union. And so what the Soviet Union has is mostly missiles that are liquid-fueled, are hard to fuel, and some bombers, which can't reach everywhere in the United States. However, by 1968, all of this has changed. The Soviets now have complete parity by 1968, including nuclear submarines, which can stay underwater forever. And same with the American nuclear submarines. They don't have to come up for oxygen. They make their own oxygen. To this day, there are Soviet nuclear submarines and American nuclear submarines floating off Russians, but now Russians, floating all over the world, off the coast of the United States, off the coast of Russia. The military calls them, for short, in their lovely language, boomers. Meaning, when they launch one of them, it goes boom. I would have loved to have shown you, which I can't do, right? No. These clips. Let me describe to you these clips. One is from one of my favorite, there are two of my favorite movies, Failsafe. There are two clips from the Failsafe movie. In the first clip, it's a cocktail party. And the cocktail party has a political scientist, somebody like me, standing there, and he's having a debate. And it comes up the question of nuclear war is really unthinkable because 40 million people will die. And he gets up there and he says, well, you know, if we launch first, we'll only lose 40 million. If we wait, we'll lose 60 to 100 million. So it's probably better to launch first. And everybody at the party thinks he's crazy, he's a murderer. And he says, no. You have to understand, this war is like all wars. Wars are about politics. This case happens to be more people will be killed, but it's really no different. And then they say, what's going to happen after the nuclear war? And then he has this great several lines. He says, well, I haven't really thought about it before, but what it's probably going to be, it'll be file clerks versus the convicts. Why? Well, because the only people who will survive the nuclear war will be two groups of people. Those who are working in big insurance companies and bureaucracies deep among a bunch of paper in the basements. They're file clerks. And the other group will be those who are underground in big, giant, highly secured prisons. The prisoners. And what you'll have set up is a conflict between the vicious and ruthless and brutal convicts and the intelligent and intellectual glasses-wearing file clerks. And that's what will happen at the end. That's what World War IV will look like. We don't know what World War III is, but we know what World War III is going to look like, but World War IV, right, will be fought with sticks and stones. Then it jumps forward. In fact, there is a problem. In this guy, there is a problem, and it appears that there's an American bomber, by mistake, that's been ordered to go bomb Moscow with nuclear weapons. And the president knows this. They're sitting in the situation asking what to do. And the president actually has the idea of proposing that the only way of stopping the Soviets from launching all of their weapons in response to an American unilateral attack, even a mistaken attack on Moscow, is if the Americans themselves agree at the same moment to drop a nuclear bomb on New York. That way, the Soviet leader will accept that it was an error because the American leader is willing to destroy his own city, but he will be unwilling to accept or unable to convince the Soviet leader, his own fellow leaders of the American sincerity that this was a mistake if he does not bomb New York City. And at that moment, our friend, the political scientist from the cocktail party, it turns out, is himself a nuclear advisor. He's not just a blowhard. And when he argues, he says, no. We should do a first strike now. Now! And one of the generals says, you're proposing mass murder. He says, it's exactly what I'm proposing. That is exactly what I'm proposing. Those who are strong must act now. They will win. We will win. He said, then the general says, well, that's what the Japanese did to us on Pearl Harbor. And our friend, the political scientist, says, yes, and they were right to do so. The only thing they did wrong is they didn't win. You understand? This is kind of nuclear doctrine. It's not crazy, but it's this is the way people started thinking. Then I have a clip, which I really would have liked to show you because it's so funny. It's my favorite movie. It's actually one of my favorite movies. It's Dr. Strangelove. How many people are here seen that movie? Yeah. Okay, so Dr. Strangelove, there's many great parts to the movie, but it has the same premise. An American colonel, actually, I think it's a general. It's a General Jack Ripper. You get the point. General Jack Ripper sends off his B-52 air wing to go bomb Moscow. And he cuts off all communications with the president to go bomb the Soviet Union. They set up a number of planes. They're able to, the president orders an attack on this base. They eventually capture, well, Ripper commits suicide. They capture, all his underlings. He had convinced his underlings that he was actually doing the right thing. The president had ordered this, that they were actually at nuclear war with the Soviets. He was actually nuts, this guy. He believed that the Soviets were poisoning us all with fluoride in our water. And he said they were destroying our purity of bodily fluids. So you can see he's a bit crazy. And he orders all of these bombers to go over there. They're able to send off the recall code. They figure out the recall code, which is POE, purity of essence, to the wing, drawing them all back except one whose recall box has been damaged, and it's headed off to go drop its load on the Soviet Union somewhere. In the meantime, the Soviet ambassador has been invited into the war room with all the paranoid American generals, and he announces that they better stop this plane because the Soviets have gotten sick of spending money on all the weapons that they have to in order to keep up with the United States. And so what they have created is a doomsday device. The doomsday device is a series of nuclear weapons hooked up to a set of computers that, under the right conditions, that is, if there's changes in air pressure or background radiation, will automatically launch all the nuclear weapons against the United States. And it will destroy the world. It will create what he calls a doomsday shroud over the earth. Whereupon they ask, the president says, is this even possible to do? And the president is played by Peter Sellers, who plays 3 parts in the movie. Very funny. So the president asks his chief weapons advisor, Dr. Strangelove. Dr. Strangelove is a German, obviously a guy who was brought over from Nazi Germany, a German weapons maker after World War II to advise them on weapons. And he says, so is this possible to do? And he says, no, not only is it possible to do, it's actually quite easy to do for any nuclear power. You must simply build enough weapons and hook it up to a string of computers, and then under the right conditions, it will explode and destroy everything. I told you I'd do something. And then he says, and it's clear he's like a bit of a Nazi himself, or was a Nazi. He has this arm that whenever he goes, he keeps on trying to go like this, and he has to hit it back down, because one wants to go to see Kyle, right? So he has to keep on beating back down to his own arm. But at the very end, he says, actually, the doomsday device is actually quite a brilliant idea, but it only makes sense if you tell us about it. Why didn't you tell us about it? See, a doomsday device only makes sense if everybody knows about it. The whole idea is to, as he says, is to create in the minds of the enemy the fear, right? The fear of retaliation. So you need to tell the other side, right? Because that only makes sense. It only creates mutually assured destruction if the other side knows. And at the end of the movie, of course, well, I won't tell you the end of the movie. You should watch it. So, you say this is just a comedy. This was Stanley Kubrick's first really great movie. Right, he goes on to make 2001: Space Odyssey. He goes on to make, what's that movie with Tom Cruise and Eyes Wide Shut. Good movie too. Right, that was his last movie. Okay. You say this is just a comedy. It is just hypothetical. It was done in the early 1960s. I would have shown you the last clip. The last clip shows, in fact, we just found this out, the Russians did it. They did it. They created a string of computers put together with a switch, and the switch would be turned on during a time of crisis. And if the conditions were correct, this switch would launch not only nuclear weapons, but chemical weapons and nerve gas at the United States. And it was officially called Perimeter, but they all refer to it in the Kremlin as Mертвая рука, the dead hand. The dead hand. And of course we know what that refers to. Right? Anybody who's seen a horror movie knows what that refers to. The hand, after it's dead, comes out and still strikes the United States, even after they're all dead. And this was invented after 1983. 1983. So that's the best I can do for you on those clips. You can go check them out for yourself on YouTube later on. I just found them on YouTube, so it's pretty easy. Everything's on YouTube. So nuclear capacity. What are we talking about here? Well, look at the United States. This gives you some idea. Total number of nuclear missiles built, 1951 to the present, about 67,000. Bombers built, 4,600. Peak number of nuclear warheads, 32,000. It's huge. Ballistic missile submarines, plenty. Each one of them launching the capabilities of launching nuclear missiles with multiple independent re-entry vehicles, otherwise known as MIRVs. Each one of those with a megaton. Dozens of times the nuclear power of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Soviet Union, pretty much comparable. 42,000. Bombers, 3,400. And ballistic submarines, also comparable. More, if anything more. See, here you had nuclear parity. All global conflict was kind of filtered through that structure. That structure. And in a way, with the two largest powers in the world, each possessing nuclear weapons, the world was very peaceful. We did not that we didn't have wars, we had lots of little wars, but we didn't have any world wars. Why didn't we have world wars? Most people argue it's because it was too scary. The Soviets and the Americans never went at it, ever toe-to-toe. There were some few incidents, but never a genuine war. Nuclear parity produced a kind of balance of terror that ultimately led to the conflict being put on a different stage. And I'd say it's really twofold. The first was, of course, economic competition, which the Americans clearly won. And the second were proxy wars. Wars fought where each side backed their party, their horse, if you will. This just gives you some idea of the stockpile of nuclear weapons, which you see has decreased since in really two stages. The United States reduced its in the 1970s. in response to nuclear weapons agreements that the Soviets secretly did not abide by, as you see from those numbers. And then, of course, after the end of the Cold War.